It's probably going to be a month at least, maybe longer, I said. Why so long? It wasn't a simple matter of an old man's house and car and checking account. I described the monumental nature of the task, the largeness of the estate, and when she still didn't understand, I told her that my grandfather was Penn Raleigh. Then I told her to read the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I saw the elements fall into place for her, like a Tetris game at work. I imagine a thing like that could take some time, she said. It'll be fine, however long you need to be away. I read in her look the things she would never say to me. They didn't really need me. Probably they never had. I went back to my apartment to get my suitcase and told the apartment manager I would be gone a while, leaving my car parked. He offered to start it and drive it occasionally, then said, Hey, you related to the Raleigh family in Oklahoma? The old guy just died and left a ton of money, my dad said. It was the most he'd ever said to me, including the day I rented the apartment. After 20 blissful years as a nobody, I was somebody again. My grandfather's death didn't exactly leave me prostrate with grief, but at the funeral reception, I tried to be a dutiful grandson. Unfortunately, Meda Amos was a constant obstacle to my mournful sense of duty. I believe the polite word is domestic. She was one of my grandfather's domestics. She was always on some innocuous errand, bringing clean plates for the buffet or cleaning up a spill. At the moment, she opened the pantry door, crossed the dining room, and came into the formal parlor, where the dense Abuson rug absorbed the sound of her footsteps. Conversation ground to an uncomfortable halt. Meda Amos began to gather up some of the dirty dishes, ignoring the stares of hushed admiration. Clearly she was aware of the problem, because she'd done what she could to minimize it. She wore a featureless dress with an apron over it. Her hair was pulled back in a severe black knot, and she wore no makeup, no jewelry, none of the artificial trappings women used to beautify themselves. Honestly, she'd been disfigured, and still we couldn't look away. That was the root of the problem. There wasn't any angle at which she was other than breathtaking, and her allure wasn't diminished by the triptych of faded scars around her mouth. 2 of them were more accurately the distinct halves of a single scar separated by her mouth, as though she'd had her lips tightly closed when the injury occurred. Her upper lip was sensually bowed, her lower lip a voluptuous invitation to a variety of obscene thoughts. I was grateful for the intervention of that scar. It slowed me down a little. The other scar was less dramatic, a secondary brushstroke above the left corner of her mouth. When my mother cleared her throat, I wanted to protest. No one else was shamed out of looking at Meda Amos by my mother's disapproval. Taking the cue, Aunt Jenny said, You can leave that until later, dear. We don't need anything else just now. Meda nodded almost imperceptibly and left. The spell broke. People went back to telling stories about my grandfather. I imagined my brother Robbie remarking, Ideally, the male of the species is the eye-catching one, because he has the numerical advantage of being able to reproduce with every female he can attract. For the female to hold that kind of magnetism, there's no benefit to the species. My mother leaned toward me and murmured, You know what Penn's will contains. He's left it all to you. You must consider that there are a number of very rapacious people waiting to take advantage of this situation. You need to visit Mr. Twidey. Establish your position with the board of directors. I hoped I would get a pass on the conversation if I kept silent, but she leaned closer, engulfing me in a cloud of Chanel No. 5, and said, Are you listening to me? Yes. Well, answer me then. I was considering telling her that she hadn't asked a question, but Father Reginald stood up at that moment and made his excuses for leaving. The other guests must have felt the tide had turned, because they began to make their farewells too, and I got up to see them out to their cars. When I came back into the parlor, I could tell my mother and aunt were annoyed with each other from the way they both smiled at me. Relieved. They reminded me of Nancy Reagan and Riza Gorbachev, except that Aunt Jenny was much cuddlier than Riza. To be fair, Nancy was cuddlier than my mother. Shall we have some dinner? My mother said. I went to help Aunt Jenny up from the sofa. As she took my arm, she smiled and said,